no. Oh, I'm a boat in the drop, make the whole world watch. You don't wanna miss this. I'm different. You're gonna wanna witness. Oh, I'm a misfit. I'm a misfit. Yeah, I'm different. I'm different. You don't wanna miss this. You're gonna wanna witness.
Chromebooks have the everything button, so you can find things instantly. Switch to Chromebook.
A little less conversation, a little more action, please. All this aggravation ain't satisfactioning me. A little more bite, a little less bite, a little less fight, a little more spite. Oh, close your mouth, open up your heart. Satisfy me, baby. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Satisfy me, baby. A little less conversation, a little more action, please. All this aggravation ain't satisfactioning me. A little more
Hello.
bite, a little
Let me turn down my music a little bit. Maybe that, right? All right. Xin chào mọi người. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. I'm gonna speak two languages in this stream, right? Vietnamese. If I say a Vietnamese comment, I'm gonna respond in Vietnamese. Otherwise, the main language will be English. And welcome to the stream. And today is pretty excited. I'm pretty excited. This has been for a while. But today I'm gonna be releasing the first stable version of Angular 3, which is an Angular library, an Angular component library that's gonna integrate Three.js into an Angular application. So, and for those of you who don't know, Three.js is a JavaScript 3D library. It is an abstraction of a WebGL. It is still verbose. It is great. It's way better than WebGL low level, but it's still very verbose. And the thing with Three.js is that, right? And the thing with Three.js is that you have to manage everything yourself, basically. So like you create like a 3D object, you're gonna have to worry about disposing that object yourself. And it's quite hard to manage and make clean. So that's where like component framework like Angular, React, or Svelte comes in to provide like an integration between Three.js or the 3D world with the component framework kind of world like render tree, DOM, and all that stuff. So that is why we have all of these frameworks or libraries together with Three.js. And from what I know, there's like a very few Three.js implementation or integration in the Angular ecosystem. In the React ecosystem, there's React 3 Fiber, very, very popular, awesome library. This is like a work of art. It's super cool library to work with 3JS in React. Recently, Svelte also has a 3JS library integrated with Svelte, and again, super cool. The main reason why there are these libraries or component framework doing this is that like the declarative approach, like you declaratively build your 3D scene on the template and be managed by the framework itself, so you don't have to worry about like destroying the object. Like the component get destroyed, your object's gonna get destroyed as well, and blah blah blah, all that stuff is gonna get taken care of for you. All right. I don't know what's next. What's next to say? And by the way, I'm on the track of like Angular ecosystem and 3JS. That's one I think. There's like this 3JS scene in Angular, Angular template for 3JS. This is one that I took a look at. There's also the NG3, I think. Angular NG3 template. There's an NG3, but yeah, it is very let me see.
Welcome to Google TV, the entertainment you love. With a
Let me see.
all your favorites are organized just for you. Finally, so you
How to speak English fluently like you live in the US for 10 years. Live in the US for 10 years. That's how. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to like English schools, anything like that. I went to school here in the US. And I've been living in the US for 10 years. So mình ở Mỹ 11 năm rồi. So, 10 năm, 11 năm rồi. That's how. Hi, xin chào mọi người từ Angular Vietnam. They're from Angular Vietnam. Hi. All right. Anyway, so let's go back to Angular 3, and right now this is the state. We're at version 2.0, beta 11. So why do we start out at version 2.0? There's a little bit of story. So, of course, like any libraries, when I first release a library, it's always start at like version 1, of course, right? But then from about 19 days ago, about like 3 weeks ago, I have decided to change the API of the library. And basically I rewrote the whole thing. Not from scratch. I took something from like one beta and I rewrote the library in the like it took 2 days. It took 2 days to rewrote. So, and then basically the whole API changed. The whole surface API of the library changed. So that's why I decided to, hey, I'm just gonna bump to 2, because like 1 is like the thing of the past now is history. So that's why I went with 2. So now we stuck with 2 without, like, we don't have 1. And this is a funny story. So Angular 3, like Angular 3.0, right? Version 3 of Angular, it's never happened. So then it became Angular 3, Angular 3JS. Hi Santos. Welcome. Very, very, very happy to see you here. Thank you for coming. I'm talking about like why do we have why are we gonna start with version 2 right now? And I'm explaining about the Angular 3 version 3 and then Angular 3.3JS, right? Now imagine if Angular 3 was actually released. How confusing would that be for my library, right? Angular 3. What are you talking about? So, I mean, I think that's a fortunate thing that Angular 3 version 3 was never released. All right, now the same thing here. I'm never gonna have the version 1 of Angular 3, but we're gonna start at version 2.0, 2.0.0. That's the first stable release of Angular 3. All right. So you know what? Let's just start. So I have the repo open here. I don't know if you can see that. Let me change it up a little bit. So I'm gonna just bump this to 18. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. And let's see if you can do okay. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So yeah, it happened for a reason. There's always a reason. I mean, I guess the Angular team is like fortune teller or something, right? They obviously know that I'm gonna make Angular 3 or something like. Oh, and by the way, motivation. Why do I make Angular 3? I'm not a 3D person. I'm not a creative developers kind of guy. I don't know anything about 3D. But I've decided to make this library because I feel like the Angular community is lacking a solution, right? I was looking at like React ecosystem, and there's this like React 3 Fiber. It's super cool. I mean I can just show you around React 3 Fiber. And you look at this, look at the examples. And look at this. This is built. Okay, let me turn down the music. Or maybe I just cut the music. All right. Is this better? Is this better now? Is this better? Let me know if it's better. And by the way, okay, back to this. This is React. What you're seeing right here is a React application with React 3 Fiber. And looks how cool it is. And looks how little code it is. How clean, not little, how clean the template is. Right? And there's this like all of these separate components. What if I want to have another cactus? What if I want to have another cactus in my scene right now, right? I mean, that is so cool. And I feel like the Angular ecosystem needs something like this. Maybe not as good, because I mean I'm the only one that I'm the only one that on the library right now. But I hope it is a start of something. It is a start of something. And again, 3D nowadays, people with devices so powerful, then they can just run 3D scenes just fine. And actually, WebGL has outperformed. It's been outperforming in terms of animations and like intensive graphics and stuff like that. It's been outperformed the DOM for so long, because you're not bound to like the actual DOM elements on the scene. Right, everything happens on your GPU and stuff like that, and like devices. This small devices have better graphics card or graphics processing unit than a lot of machines. So again, back to why the motivation. This is one of the motivation. I don't want Angular to like fall behind. So that's why I make it. And I'm gonna be honest, I ported a lot of things from React 3 Fiber to Angular 3. And there are fundamentals different between the two approaches. I'm gonna talk about it in the documentations. All right, so I think that's it, right? We go through what it is, the motivation, and the agenda for today is just I'm gonna release it, and hopefully it goes well, right? If anything happens, we're gonna try to fix on live, and then we're gonna go through the documentations. I have some documentations, like very rudimentary, very basic documentations that shows you how to get started. And let's try to follow the documentation to see if it's actually accurate and correct, right? And the goal is to achieve what the documentation tells us to achieve, right? And then we go from there. All right. So now a little bit of the project. So this project is built with NX. So there's this NX.json. We are on the latest version of NX, version 13.2.3, We're on the latest version of Angular. Let me hold on. There we go. We're on the latest version of Angular. We're on version 0.134 of 3, and 3JS right now is on 135. And the reason why I'm on 134 right now is because the type definition of 3 types 3 right here is still on 134. That's the only reason. Right, we have component store. So I'm using component store under the hood for Angular 3. This might change to a different solution, but that's the implementation details. Right, and a couple of libraries that deal with different stuff in the 3D environment. Okay, so that's the packages that this project is using. Then we have 4 libraries right now, 4 packages right now. So Angular 3, if you go to npmjs.com package Angular 3, hopefully I can see that. There we go. Packages, Angular 3. You can see there's a bunch of packages, but pay attention to the one with the beta 11. In the process of rewriting the library, I condensed, I changed the APIs and all that stuff, and kind of retired a couple of packages. One is the controls, and the loaders has been retired for a long time. Pop motion as well. I'm gonna have to rethink. So pop motion is the library that helps you to animate your 3D objects. But I feel like the API is a little bit clunky, so I just retired. I'm gonna rethink about it, and maybe using something like GreenSocks instead of pop motion. But I don't know. That's something else. Helpers. So I retired it, and then there's Canon and Soba. To my Vietnamese viewers, to my Vietnamese friends, Soba is actually Soba, right? Number 3. Soba. That's literally number 3 in Vietnamese, Soba. Because I'm not a creative person, there's a reason behind that. So again, React 3, Fiber. There's like collection of helpers, collection of utilities, like and additional stuff that helps with building like on top of the core stuff from 3JS. And they have this package, they call it dry, and this is number 3. Dry number 3. It is number 3. It is number 3. What does dry mean in German? Yeah, in German it means 3. It's number 3. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna use number 3 from Vietnamese. That's why it's soba or soba. It's not the noodles. It's soba. It's number 3, literally. Okay, so now we have Soba, Canon, Core, and Post Processing. So that's the 4 packages that Angular 3 exposing right now for the latest version. I mean, if you start Angular 3 today, this is the 4 packages that you're gonna use. In addition, I have like a demo application that I test out things. Right, I'm just gonna go here and I test out things, and the documentation is a Storybook application. So I write my documentation in Storybook. All right, so that's the structure. Oh, there's this generators 3, and of course, let's continue with the release before we get into like the details of all of these, which I'm gonna go through and then ask me questions if you have any questions. Okay, so now I'm on man. Everything looks good. I don't have any working right now, so I'm just gonna run release. So I'm gonna run npm run release. It's gonna run release it, and it's gonna based on my current beta version, which is 2.0 beta, and it's gonna release 2.0.0. Phi Dương mình xài phím Moonlander. Xíu nữa mình sẽ gửi link cho bạn. Mình xài phím tên là Moonlander. Okay, everything looks good. It's gonna bump on the packages package.json. We can take a look real quick here. That is gonna bump to the 4 packages, and then the main repo version, and then it's gonna generate the change log for me based on the commit, of course. We'll get back here. So this is the change log. All right, I'm gonna hit yes. I'm gonna commit this one. I'm gonna tag 2.0 yes, and I'm gonna push yes, and then I'm gonna create a release on GitHub. So now at this point on GitHub, there is a release 2.0 right here, right? But it's not out there yet. I'm gonna have to hit npm run publish to actually publish 2.0 to npm. Ooh, exciting! Right, so that's success. So now we can check npm and refresh. Now we are on 2.0. Right, if we look at Angular 3 core and we look at versions, that's 2.0. That's the latest version, the first stable version of Angular 3. We're out of beta. I feel like I'm very satisfied with the current API, and I feel like it should be ready. So that's now we're ready, right? We're ready. Now the next step is to I'm gonna go to my sandbox. I'm gonna go to my sandbox, and I'm gonna say npx Angular CLI as a new ng3, and I'm gonna make a minimal. Absolutely, that's the plan. Lý do là mình chưa có dựng được cái scene đó là vì cái Soba của mình, cái Soba library á, nó vẫn còn thiếu một số thứ. Nó vẫn còn thiếu một số thứ. Cho nên là chưa có làm được. Thực sự là anh đang build cái Soba từ thằng Dre. So there's still time. Mình muốn làm cái documentation đầy đủ một tí rồi mình mới bắt đầu quay lại mình làm features. Và ở cuối stream này, sau khi mà mình làm xong cái documentation. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna speak this in English. This is like the agenda. So after we go through the documentation today, then I'm gonna go to GitHub issues, and we're gonna file issue and what we're gonna do next for this library. And of course, contributions are welcome. Okay, contributions are welcome. I plan to write contribution guide pretty soon, so contributions is welcome. Any contribution, you have issues or you have examples that you want to convert to Angular 3, you can submit like a discussion. You could just put in the discussion. I might do it. Someone else might do it. All right. Just it is open source, so play with it. Support, submit issues, submit feature requests. Yeah, and make a pull request. I'm willing to guide you like hand by hand. We can jump in a Zoom call and we can pair programming. Right. Okay, so we're gonna create a new Angular CLI application. Boom. While this is running, I'm gonna pop the documentation. So documentations is available at Angular 3 netlify.app. I'm gonna pop this in the stream right now. All right, so right there. So that's the documentations of Angular 3. And then this is it. So this is the logo, and we're gonna submit the logo too, like Angular logo. We're gonna submit the logo. Where's that site? Just go to Twitter. I'm just gonna go to Twitter, and I'm gonna go to official logo of Angular 3. This one, angularlogos.com. I'm gonna submit the logos. Add your logo. Make a new pull request. Let's look at this. We're gonna do this later. Right? We're gonna do this later. I'm gonna leave the site here so I remember to go back to it. All right. So our application has been completed. I'm just gonna go there and we're gonna leave it there. Actually, just open up in WebStorm as well. There. So now we have our applications version 13 of Angular ready. And also there's a, let's look at this. So RxJS 7 as well. All right, great. Now let's look at the documentation. So this is the documentation. I'm gonna just zoom in a little bit for you guys. So this is the Angular 3 logo. This is made by an Angular community. He's not on Twitter, so I cannot like tag him or thank him publicly. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you, King Daboja. That's his nickname, King Daboja. Thank you for this logo. And then and then there's this tagline by Mike Hartington. What happened to Angular 3.0? Well, it became Angular 3, and that's the inside joke that I've been running with. All right, so again, first, what is Angular 3? Angular 3 is a component library. Yes, absolutely. That's the plan for sure. That's the plan for sure. ng-add, and of course, there should be ng-update. And there's a reason for that, because 3JS is like they change version quite a bit, very actively maintained. I think that's a good thing, but it makes it hard for libraries like Angular 3 or even SvelteKube or whatever, and whatever component library that wraps, right? The keyword here is wraps, that wraps around 3JS. Because for each of the entities of 3JS, so by entities, I mean, if you go to documentation of 3JS and you look up like material, so each of these is what I call an entity. Then this is materials, right? And you look at geometry, there's this, each of these is an entity. And then you have light, right? Light helper is also an entity. So all of these inside of 3JS are entities of 3JS. And for each of those, the component library, any component library that wraps 3, has to provide like an equivalence, right? So, I mean, there are hundreds of them in 3JS, so you're gonna have to have hundreds of like directives or components that wrap all of those. And it's hard to keep track, to keep up with it. But Angular 3 is using generators to keep up with that. So of course there are breaking changes between 3JS version. So Angular 3 is going to provide ng-update or even or basically migrations support when you have a new version. Okay. Why is it good to use NGT, or NGT is short for Angular 3? So you're gonna utilize the template or basically Angular capabilities to build your 3D scenes declaratively, and we're gonna take a look at that when we go through the first scene in the documentations. How does NGT work? Hierarchical dependency injection, all of this. I would try to explain all of this in the documentations in later pages of documentations. Right now it's not very explained, but and by the way, without the understanding of this doesn't prevent you from using the library, but it helps if you know. It's okay if you don't, but it would help if you know. So this is an example. This is a real example running with Angular code. And it is from here. It is a real example right here. It's a real spinning cube, right? So Storybook, I just use Storybook to render that right here. Right. So here, what is the difference between Angular 3 and React 3 Fiber? And many points in comparison with Angular 3 with React 3 Fiber listed here in SvelteKube. So SvelteKube, they also have a section. What is the difference? All right, so this is the difference. I mean, if you want to read, go ahead and read it. I have a link in my documentations. But basically, at the basic level, React 3 Fiber is a renderer. So what does this mean that is a renderer? So it is basically how Angular, React, Vue, or any component library or component framework renders an element, right? So when you type div inside of Angular template, right? Angular has to do something with that div. It creates an HTML div element for you. So that's the work of the renderer. It renders things. Now React 3 Fiber does something similar to that. So instead of wrapping React component, like so I'm just gonna put in some dummy code, right here. So wrapping means that in React you would have a mesh component, right? And inside of this mesh component, you're gonna have like a mesh equal new3 mesh. So this is what it means to be called wrapping. You have your old component wraps a 3 entity. So this is wrapping. Now what 3JS does, what React 3 Fiber does is that they are a renderer, which means that you type a mesh on your scene like that, right? And this will go through the Fiber renderer, and Fiber renderer creates a 3 mesh automatically. So basically you know, like you don't have to pay the cost of the wrapping component, right? So earlier you go from mesh to 3.mesh, but now with here you get 3.mesh directly. So that is a renderer. All right, so that is the renderer. So what cool about this is that happens at runtime. So it regardless of what version 3JS have, it will always work the same. It will always work the same. It morphs itself, changes itself with 3JS version changing. So it's very cool. But there's a catch, because it generates at runtime. So they basically they have to keep track of, so right, like these right here, they have to keep track of. React 3 Fiber has to keep track of those. So you have ambient light, right? React 3 Fiber has to keep track of those namespaces from 3. So this one is a 3 ambient light, right? So basically the Fiber renderer has to know something about this to create this when it sees this, right? So at the current version of React 3 Fiber, version 7 and below, you don't have any trace checking. So basically you load 3JS, you load all of 3JS in all the time. So that's one caveat. On the other hand, NGT or Angular 3 is a component library, which means that for almost each 3JS entity, there's corresponding entity of Angular 3. So for a mesh, for a 3.mesh, I have an NGT mesh directive with the following selector, NGT mesh. So this is NGT, right? However, I generate most of these. I generate this. So at build time, before I publish, I regenerate my application with the latest version of 3. And I would just push the generated code to NPM. All right. So that's the difference. And that's how I maintain the library. The rendering 3JS scene is done outside of Angular Zone, so everything related to NGT components or directives is outside of Zone. This is because that everything in 3D happens inside of canvas, so you don't really and you change state by mutating the actual object properties inside of like a frame loop. So you would want to be outside of angular zone because you don't want to trigger chain detection often, right? And of course, when there's zoneless available, like natively, then Angular 3 will be able to provide even a better experience to the consumers. All right, so and of course I note here, it's heavily inspired by React 3 Fiber. Many concepts and many features are ported. All right, that's it. And of course, you need to have a fundamentals understanding of Angular and 3JS to use this. So this is not like using Angular 3 does not make you like it does not make you know 3JS. You have to know 3JS and you have to know Angular before you use this library. All right, that's the introduction. Now let's go to installation. As of the moment, I believe I haven't checked, I haven't tested, but this library support Angular 13. So I haven't tested with Angular 12. I'm gonna test later, but it supports Angular 13 and it supports ArcGIS 7. You have to be on ArcGIS 7. So basically, the lowest Angular version that you can use is Angular 12 or 12.2. Whatever Angular version supports ArcGIS 7. 3JS version 0.134. I like to because this is a wrapper component, so you have to stay on the exact version of 3 of the library. So NGX component store 13. The SOBA package depends on 3 standard lib or library. Post processing, the package from Angular 3 depends on the post processing of GitHub, of the internet. And at version 6, Canon is physics, so we could just look at that real quick. Canon is a physics engine, so we look at maybe this one. I don't know, click to play. Yeah, so this one right here is Canon. So you have constraint and you have actual physics constraint, boundary, and gravity. So maybe this. Right. So yeah, you have bouncing, you have gravity and stuff like that. So that's Canon. Right, Canon, the Canon package of NGT depends on Canon ES and also Canon ES debugger. All right, installation. So because we're on Angular 13, so we should be good to just start adding the dependency. So we just copy this, go back to WebStorm. Right, I'm gonna just paste that in Angular 3 core. Hi Bing here. All right, so Angular 3 core add version 2 has been installed. Next, we're gonna install Angular 3, the library itself at 0.134. So we're gonna pin the version now to 0.134. Just install that. All right, 134 has been installed. Next, we have the type definition for 3. Just gonna install that. Cool. All right, next we're gonna need a component store, and the reason for it is right here. So component store is extremely lightweight. It is also well tested. So that's the reason why I use component store instead of creating like a service myself. So I decided to keep it as a peer dependency because the consumers, you guys, when you install Angular 3 and then you install component store as a dependency for your project, you can actually make use of it because it's just a subject as a service. But it's like it's a coolest subject as a service. So I believe that the consumers will definitely gain more than what they have to pay for with component store. So that's why I keep it as a peer dependency instead of dependency. Because if I keep it as the peer dependency, you have to install it in your project, which means that it is made available for your project to use it better with like autocomplete and all that stuff, right? So and of course later on, if I decided to remove component store from Angular 3, you don't have you're not gonna run into a problem if you use component store as a peer dependency, as a dependency of Angular 3. So I mean, it's just, I think it's worth it. All right, for the ecosystem, we're not gonna worry about SOBA processing in Canon today. We might take a look at them. Okay, there's a typo here. So okay, guys, contributions. You can make a pull request, remove this. Okay. So this is an ecosystem, core, SOBA, post processing, Canon, and like the quick description of what they are right here. Right, so now we have, do we have to be installed? Oh, we have not. So we just let's install component store right there. I'm gonna sit down because I'm tired. All right, I think we're ready. Let's double check. Let's double check. So we have component store, we have Angular 3 core, we have 3, and we have types 3. So we have everything we need to actually start. Let's go to the first scene, documentation. So this is our first 3D scene. So the documentation is going to walk you through creating your first 3D scene using Angular 3. Right, I have a TLDR section. If you just jump straight to code and just copy this code, and it should just work. But I'm gonna go through each step with you guys. So the first thing is setting up the canvas, right? The canvas component. So everything in Angular 3 is gonna start with the canvas component, right? And the canvas component is exposed by the selector of NGT canvas. So everything in Angular 3 is gonna be prefixed with NGT. The selectors, the models, the tokens, injection tokens, the modules, and all the directives components is going to be prefixed with NGT. All right, so let's put NGT canvas in, and NGT canvas is exported by the NGT core module. We're going to go back to our application. We're going to go to source. We're going to go to app module. All right, this is app module. We're gonna add the NGT core module, and we import it from Angular 3 core, right? So now we're gonna go to app.component, remove all of this, save, and now we can put in NGT canvas. So now we have a canvas. Now go back to this, right? Exactly, let's import NGT core, use the NGT canvas, and then put the NGT core module in the imports of your module, right? So NGT canvas is going to set up the following. It's going to set up a renderer, a scene, and a camera, which are the basic building blocks of Three.js. So if you use Three.js, like vanilla Three.js, you're going to have to set up these three manually. A render loop that will render scene on every frame. So again, if you use vanilla Three.js, you're gonna have to do this manually, and then a resize event, so that when you resize, the scenes gets shifted because the camera blah 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 gets shifted along with the resize event, so that your scene will always look correct. All right. So again, so now here, NGT canvas takes up the dimensions of the parent element. So this one right here is gonna text up whatever the app root host element gives it. So right now we're on the app component host element app root, right? we can wrap entity canvas with a div, so we can put the canvas anywhere. We can put a size on the div like 400 by 400 pixel, and then the canvas, your 3D scene, is going to be 400 by 400. So it's convenient that way, so you can lay out your canvas anywhere. It doesn't have to be full screen, right? Most of the time it is full screen, but it doesn't have to. So entity canvas takes care of that for you. But we're gonna go full screen. So to do that, we're gonna go to style, and we're gonna make the HTML and the body of height 100%, of width 100%, and we're gonna take out a margin on the body. So this is the style that to allow the entity canvas to go full screen. Now okay, back to this. Now back to the component. Back to the documentations. So now we have the canvas. Now we can start adding objects into this canvas or onto this canvas, right? So now we have adding a mesh. So a mesh in Three.js, I shouldn't be explaining it. Like, there's no explanation about a mesh in Angular 3 because you're supposed to know what a mesh is. Like assuming that you know Three.js, but I'm gonna explain it. A mesh is an object in the 3D scene. So let's take a look at this, like Rubik's cube, right? This is a mesh, but imagine there's no colors and there's no shape on this mesh. It's just some representation in the 3D space, and then you can put like geometry, which is a shape of this. So this is a cube, so a box geometry, and then a material, which is the skin of this, so the color of this. So a mesh plus geometry plus material is an object that you can see in 3D. So this is the combination of those three. So now we're gonna start with adding the mesh. Okay. So mesh is exposed by a selector called NGT mesh, and it is imported from NGT mesh module. So almost everything inside of Angular 3 is a SCAM, or single component as module. So that it just follows best practice of Angular library. So we don't give you I don't give you everything from one entry point. So everything mesh is gonna be from meshes. So we're gonna just import this, right? Just copy that, go back to app module, right? Put it back, put it here, and then add it to the imports array and GT mesh module. Save that. And now we can put the NGT mesh on the scene. And we're gonna put it in between NGT canvas as a children to the canvas, right? NGT mesh, save. All right, so NGT mesh is provided by NGT mesh module, and this is where I explain some details about the code that we wrote. Right, and I just give it right here. So Three.js mesh is one of the most basic objects in Three.js. Again, that's a typo right there. It is used to hold a geometry, right? To hold a shape, a geometry, and a material like a skin of it, to represent a specific shape in 3D space, right? So now we have the mesh, we have that kind of space right there. We want to give it a geometry and a material. So we're gonna use with a box geometry. So we're gonna create a cube, and we're gonna use the mesh basic material. So as the name suggests, this is a basic material. So it's just a basic skin that you can give color to. Right, so NGT box geometry is exported by NGT box geometry module from geometries. Mesh basic material module is from materials. And again, there is a convention, and I talk about this convention in the API/objects page. The convention is that everything is prefixed with NGT, and then whatever after is the Three.js class in kebab case, in dash case. So if you look at this one, so box geometry, and you look at the documentation of 3, and you look for box geometry, there's a box geometry class right there. And you can think of it, okay, I'm gonna just use this class and go back to NGT, make it a kebab case, and probably NGT has it. Same thing with this. So we look up material. So we look up basic material. There's a mesh basic material. Right, so right there, mesh basic material module and mesh basic material. So that's the convention. So as you look up documentation from Three.js and you find a class, that class is probably provided by Angular 3 with this convention, right? Prefixed with an NGT, and then that class, the name of that class in kebab case. All right, so we have the module. We're gonna put the modules inside of the imports array, and then we'll go back and put it in the template. So let's go here. All right, so we have, I'm gonna just use auto import. So we have box geometry module, NGT mesh basic material module. Save that. I'll go back to the component. Now, the geometry, a geometry tree and a material usually goes with a mesh. So technically, they are children of the mesh, right? So we're gonna group them as the content child of the NGT mesh. So here I'm gonna put box geometry, and I'm gonna put mesh basic material as children to the NGT mesh. I'm gonna save, and let's go back to the documentations. All right, so documentation say at this point we should see something on the scene. All right, so let's just serve the application. So I'm gonna go to my terminal. I'm gonna run npm run start. It's gonna, of course, no, it's gonna serve our application, and we should see the cube. The documentation site says that we should see a cube, so we should see a cube. There we go. It doesn't look like a cube to me, right? It is a square. But let's compare. The documentation sees the same thing, so we should be on the right track. So let's continue, right? Now we see something, so that's a good thing. We see something. So now let's go back. Right, so minus the imports, which sometimes are held by our IDEs, right? Our scene is like 7 lines of code. So let's, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. It's not even 7, but okay, whatever. So it's about 6 or 7 lines of code. And this is what you're gonna have to write if you use Three.js, vanilla Three.js, right? So you're gonna have to set up a scene, set up a camera, and then set up a renderer. And then you're gonna have to set the size of the renderer. And then you're gonna have to put the renderer element onto your DOM. Right, and then you're gonna have to render using the scene and the camera. You're gonna have to set up your like animation loop yourself. And then this is the mesh, like this part mesh, and then you have the mesh. You have to add the mesh to the scene. Angular 3 takes care of all of that for you. So with this template, so you declaratively tells Angular that, okay, hey Angular, this box geometry and this mesh basic material, I want them to be added to this mesh, and then I want this mesh to be added to the scene that the canvas created automatically for you, so that you don't have to do anything else. You just write your scene on the template. So that's the goal. That's the goal of the library, or any component library, or any library that deals with Three.js. All right, so let's go back to animation. All right, 3D scene is boring. Boring without animation. Right now, we don't see anything on our scene. It's just a square, a gray square. It is boring, right? So let's just add some animation, right? So let's see how we can spin our cube. Right, the documentation say blah blah blah, something like this. Okay, so let's follow. So it's saying, all right, we're gonna have a template variable. So this is a template variable. That's the name. That's the term. Template variable in Angular. And what we're gonna, okay, we're gonna grab the reference of the NGT mesh. So the NGT mesh exposes itself, the instance, like this instance. So basically when you put this directive on the template, Angular is gonna create a new NGT mesh for you. Basically that's what it does, right? But now this line is saying, okay, for this instance that Angular create, give that to me and assign that to the variable mesh that I have access on the template. Right, so let's do that. Right, so now if we try to analyze this mesh variable, we should see that it is, so mesh, right, it is of type NGT mesh, and on itself there is a mesh object. So this is the basic idea of a wrapper component, right? My NGT mesh wraps the Three.js mesh. So that's why you have to access this like that. And then on this mesh, you have all kind of information from the Three.js. Right, so let's look at this. Is mesh to material geometry. We can actually compare this to the Three.js documentation, and we should see the same thing. Right, so just to show you guys that. Okay, next we have this. Okay, next it says, okay, listen for animate ready output with this handler, and then we pass in the actual three mesh, not the directive, but the actual object three mesh. All right, let's do this. So I'm just gonna copy that, go back to this, paste that in. Of course, I'm gonna have to create this method. All right, on animate, it accept a mesh, and that is from 3, right? This is the mesh from 3. And what do we want to do with this? So now we can animate the mesh by incrementing the mesh rotation. Okay, I'm gonna just copy this, right? Oh, Copilot, GitHub Copilot ought to give me that. Hi, Brandon. Welcome. Thank you for showing up. I'm just gonna go through the documentations like a real consumer to make sure that my documentations works. But I like this. So here I'm saying that. So here I'm saying that, hey, rotation on the x-axis and the y-axis increment by 0.01, and I think this is in radian. So run by 0.01. And how often? So the documentation doesn't really explain this, but I'm gonna explain it. So animate ready is a special output on the NGT mesh on any 3 object that can animate. So animate ready actually subscribes to the animation frame loop that the NGT canvas creates, and it will invoke this method. So imagine, so you have the output, so you know, as an Angular developer, you have the output, you would do animate ready, not emit, right? You would do that. So this is, so inside of Angular 3, I do this, but I do this outside of Angular zone, and I also do this for every frame, so that your event handler, this event handler right here, is invoked every frame and at most 60 frames per second and outside of angular zone, so it stays performant. Right, so now we have this. Let's go back to the scene. Let's go back to our scene, and we should see the cube is spinning. Right, so it's spinning 60 frames per second, and each frame we increment the rotation by 0.01 radian. And we can confirm that it is outside of angular zone by checking console log NG zone dot is in angular zone or not. So is this in angular zone? And you should see false. Right, it is outside of angular zone. So far so good, right? So far so good. And let's see the documentation. Documentation also see the spinning cube. So we're on the right track. We're on the right track. Right, so what's next? So next, because we're saying, okay, now I have the scene, I have the spinning cube, I know how to do animation with my cube. What else? What's next? Why do I need Angular for this, right? Now let's dive into the Angular world. So now we're going to separate our cube into a reusable Angular component. All right, so it's super easy. We're just going to create a cube component, and we grab the template that we had and put that in the cube. So let's just do that. So go back to my component, right? I'm gonna make like a component inline. You shouldn't do that. You should have like a cube.component.ts, but whatever. So here I'm gonna say cube component, right? I have a component selector. I'm gonna call this app cube, my template, and then of course chain detection on push. That, and I'm gonna just straight copy this and put it in my template, and copy this animation handler as well, put it in the cube component. And of course I'm gonna have to provide or declare this cube component with my app module right there. I'll go back here. It should be happy. Now let's go back to my canvas, and it just say app cube, and I save, and it still works. Right, so now I have extracted this into a separate component, and it still works. And what does that give me? What does that give me? It gives me, now I can add component state. So now my mesh can have some state that I can manage using just Angular, like regular Angular. So let's do that. So the documentation says that, okay, hey, add a hover and active state to your component and default those two to false. So I'm gonna do that. All right, I'm gonna put it here. So these two are my component state, right? That my template can react to. So now let's, what can we do? What can we do with this? You guys can follow the documentation, but I'm gonna like break character and go back to being Chow, to being the library author, and I'm gonna explain what we're gonna do. So for hover, we want to change the color when we hover over our cube, and then go back to the previous color when we not hover anymore. And to change the color, to set up the color, we're gonna, what is the color, right? It is the skin of the object. So we're gonna change the material. So on the materials, and basically on all materials, there's an input called parameters. And this parameters accept an object. And what does this object looks like? Right? This is time to consult the Three.js documentation. So if you go to Three.js documentation and we look at mass basic material, you can see that it actually takes in a parameters. It is an object. And what object does this have? let's see. It has color. All right, so we can use the color to set the color of the material of the skin of this object. So we can go back to that. We say color. Okay, so what color you want to give me? If you are hovering, I'm gonna give you, I don't know, chat. If you know a color that you like, give me that color. It can be any CSS color. It can be any CSS color. So whatever you want. I'm gonna just put turquoise and tomato. So when you are hovering, give me turquoise. When you're off hovering, give me tomato. Great. Right, so now we have that in action. How do we change hover state? Right now we're not changing it anywhere. So go back to the mesh, which is the object itself. On the mesh, there's there are several events. And if you type in shift parentheses, you should see those events. And we are interested in pointer over, right? So my pointer over the object, then my hover will becomes true. Pointer out, hover will become false. Say this. I forgot to set up prettier. So this is what we have to deal with. Right, so pretty simple to understand, right? Straightforward. And we'll see if it works. Go back to the scene. This is our scene. All right, so it looks like it's working. I'm not hovering, so it has tomato color. Now I'm hovering the cube and it changes color. What? So now we're using Angular like capabilities of reacting to the state, like change detection. When my state change, my color change, right? So that's Angular. And we can actually take a look at the Angular DevTools as well. So I'm going to open up the Angular DevTools. I'm going to open up the profiler, and I'm going to say record. Right? Nothing happening yet until I actually interact. See that? Every time I change color, my scene, not re-render, but my scenes get updated with that color one time, even though this runs in a frame loop of 60 frames per second. When you're not interacting, nothing happening. Right? And I'm gonna stop recording, and we can just take a look at maybe this one. Yeah, we look at the flame chart. It's pretty much nothing. Right? Remember, we have the mesh directive. We have the mesh basic material directive. Why are we not seeing that gets updated here? Now, when we change the color of a material, we're just mutating that color of the material inside of the canvas scene without changing or without recreating any instance of the directives, so that it doesn't affect performance. So it changes that directly. So inside of Angular 3, there's like a mechanism and logic and like a flow of applying new properties to the object, so that it is outside of Angular zone. Even though when you hover, when you change the state, it is inside of Angular zone. So that is because when I invoke these event, mind you, these are not event by the DOM. These are objects inside of 3D scene. They don't have DOM representation, so they don't have DOM events. So these are like custom event, but they are made like natural for the Angular developers to use, and you just attach an event binding to these events, right? And you can just change state, and I make sure when you invoke these events, I get you back inside of Angular zone so that you can update your state. And this is the only time that Angular 3 goes back into the Angular zone, so that you can update your state. Right? So that's hovering. Now we have active. So active, what I want to do with active is that I want to click, right? I want to click on this cube, and when I click, it is active. When I click again, it goes back to inactive. And when I am inactive, I want my cube to be a little bit bigger, right? So we can do that again. There's a click event, and we can say active equals to not active. So basically toggling the active state. Now to change how big the mesh is, you can change two things. One, you can change the geometry. So the geometry, if you look at the geometry right here, right, just look it up. Box geometry, the geometry accept width, height, and depth. So you can actually change the width, the height, and the depth of a box geometry. However, because we change the constructor arguments of a box geometry, so every time you change a constructor arguments, this gets reconstruct. So because constructor argument change, so it's gonna have to be reconstructed. It's not like parameters. Parameters is like updating that props without recreating, but updating geometry constructor arguments, like you change the width, height, and depth, basically you have to tell the GPU to redraw that geometry with the new arguments. Right, so we're not going to do that. Another approach is to change the scale, right? Change the scale of the mesh. So on the mesh, there is a scale input, and we can say if you active, I'm gonna make you bigger. If you're not active, please go back to 1. So this is 1 unit, and when you active, make you bigger on all dimensions. So this is X, Y, Z, or width, height, depth. 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. Right, so now we have that. Let's go back to our scene. Right, now I'm hovering. I'm gonna click. It works. There we go. It is bigger, right? And I can keep clicking. Oh, so now it is working. And let's go back to the documentations and the documentation. So this is actually a story that renders like real. It renders real thing here. It's not an image. So you can actually interact with the documentation here. Right, so again, we're at the same stage as the documentation, so that's a good sign. So let's keep moving. So here's where I explain about the events. Right, they look like DOM events, but they're not. Right, now this is the last section of the documentation, or the first scene, and I'm saying here's why a component framework is needed. We have 1 cube. What's better than 1 cube? 2 cubes. So we're gonna do that. Again, I'm gonna ignore the documentations now. You can just follow the documentations, and we can compare. After that, we can compare what we have against what the documentations has. Right, so I'm gonna go back to my WebStorm. Right, so now what I want to have, I want to give my cube component, right, an input of precision. It is of type NGT vector 3. So a precision is an XYZ. So right, XYZ precision inside of 3D. So it's gonna be a vector 3. And I'm gonna bind that to my precision on my mesh. Now that my cube component has the input, I can just go up here. All right, I can go back here, copy that, and I can just duplicate this one, and then I can just save. Right now, I would just see nothing, but they're actually 2 cubes here, but they're on top of each other. So now we're gonna have to change the location, the position of them to make them like separate. So now let's go to this first cube. position. I'm gonna bind X, Y, and Z to it. Right. So for the first cube, I'm gonna move that cube 2 spaces or 2 units to the right. So that's the X, right? The X axis is horizontal. So I'm gonna move them 2 points to the right. And for this one, I'm gonna move as 2 points to the left. So negative, go negative, go to the left. All right, so now go back to my scene, and I should see 2 cubes. Look at that. And they have their old state. They have their old state. All right, so now I have 2 cubes that completely, completely separate. And let's just compare this with the documentation. The documentation, render, please. Okay. Shows the same thing. All right, so we are good. The documentation is good, but I want to do something extra, right? The documentation stops here, but I'm gonna do something extra. Right now, the cube accepts position. I want to pass in something that make this cube a little bit different than this cube. All right, so I'm gonna just make the flag. Call this flag of it's different. I'm gonna make that false, right? Now, inside of here, I'm saying, okay, if you are different, then do this instead. So do that, else do this. So there's gonna rotate. There's gonna rotate differently. Next, same thing here, right? If you are active, if you are is different, and then do that. If not, then I'm gonna give this a little something different color. I don't know what color. Oh yeah, whip and dodger loop. Save, and I'm gonna go back to my second cube, and I'm gonna pass in is different, and I'm gonna pass in true for this one. So I'm gonna go back to my scene, and they look different. They look different. Oh, that looks funny. That looks weird. Am I? Let's not rotate a Y. Let's just rotate the X. There we go. So now they are different. They are 2 cubes that we're using the same template, and that is why we have this component framework that wrapping 3JS, so that you can use these wonderful features of a component-based framework. Right? We can stop here, but I want to keep going. What if you want to look at this? Look at this. It looks boring. I mean, the cube looks a little bit boring. I guess why? Because it a basic material, it a basic skin. It doesn't have any reflection. It doesn't have any. To be honest with you, it doesn't even look like a cube. It's like a blob of rectangle, diamond. I don't know. So we're gonna add something different and make them looks like a cube. The first thing we want to do is we want to change the material. So this material doesn't reflect light, so we cannot do anything to make them look better, except for we change it to something different. So we're gonna use a standard material, and I'm gonna import the standard material module. So right here, go back here, and I'm gonna go back to my scene. The first thing you're gonna see is yes, Jason. Yes, Jason. I haven't tested it, but I have logic. So in the NGT canvas, there's a VR, right? There's a VR that you can set to true. If that is true, then Angular 3 is gonna use, if you look at the WebGL renderer, it's that animation loop right here. So if if you pass VR2 to the entity canvas, it's gonna use set animation loop on the renderer, which requires for WebXR. So normally it just use request animation frame, but if you pass that in, it's gonna use set animation loop. I haven't tried. I mean, you can try. You can try and let me know. I'm gonna have like an example up, I don't know, sometime soon. And yeah. All right, let's go back to the scene. Right, so right now we see 2 black cubes. What happened? We have colors. The reason why is that right now these cubes, they have different skin. You have to like put light on it. Like imagine these 2 cubes are basically inside of a dark room. There's no lights, so we're gonna add some light. The first light is the most basic light, is an ambient light. So ambient light is like an environment light that's just light up everything. So that's NGT ambient light. We're gonna add NGT ambient light module, save, and we should see the color back, right? But then they still not like a 3D object. So another light that we want to add is NGT spotlight, and we go back to the component and say NGT spotlight and save. Now you should see something different. So that is spotlight right there. I want to move, so the spotlight is position at 0, 0, 0 right now, so they at the center. So we're gonna move them closer to us, go to the right a little bit, and go up a little bit, so that they shine from the right and down to the center. So precision, I'm gonna give this one maybe 2, 2, and 2, and that is our cubes. Now they looks like cubes now, right? They look like cubes now with like dimensionality. You can clearly see the faces of the cubes. That is, yeah. Right now, so those just lights. So look at how easy it is to use with Angular 3, right? You just put it on a scene, give it some props, and we just react correctly. Hi, lady. All right, next, what I want to do, I want to control the camera. I want to be able to grab the scene and like rotate them around. So to do that, I want to add, I'm going to have to add a new library. This library is going to be an npm install Angular 3 / Soba. So inside of Soba, again, if you haven't watched from the beginning, Soba exposes a collection of helpers, components, utilities, components, or directives that helps with the 3D scene. So now we have Soba install. We can add the NGT Soba orbit controls. And that's just it, right? We just save and go back here. Oh, need to restart because we stop it. So I'm going to npm run start. It's going to run ngserve. Oh, by the way, Soba orbit controls is exported from Soba orbit controls module, and is from Soba / controls. Now go back to here. I just give it a refresh, and it doesn't look that much different. But actually, now I can grab and rotate, zoom in and zoom out with the orbit controls, right? The control takes over my camera, so I can do that, right? One last thing I want to add is NGT grid helper. So right here, just put NGT grid helper and save. And now my scene has like a grid that you can see. You can see right here, this is the center. Right here is the center, right? I move this cube 2 unit to the right, this one 2 unit to the left, right? So they are to the left and to the right. So that's a grid helper. I think that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. And the rest is just, I mean, you guys can go explore. We'll build your 3D scene. What I would suggest is to go to 3GS and go to examples, and you can pick one. All right, and you can pick one and try to build it with Angular 3. Yeah, just try to build it with Angular 3. I have a couple of examples that I want to show you. We can just go straight to the documentations, go to the examples. So the first thing is compile body. Just click on compile body and go to the canvas. And this is the compile body. I'm just going to give it a refresh. Right, so Angular 3 supports some physics. Right, there's a gravity. Like these objects, there's a plane right there. This is the plane, and these objects have gravity. If we look at the docs, and this is the code for it. Again, the canvas, the lights, and then we just wrap everything inside of physics. There's a plane. There's compound. Compound is those like objects grouped together, and they just work. And let's look at the plane, right? The plane is just a group with the mesh of plane geometry. Yes, I'm gonna show that. I'm gonna show that real quick right now. Here we have NGT physics plane. NGT physics plane is a directive, or basically it's like a composite directive that you can put on these object and makes that aware to the physics environment. So this plane now has physics environment. So those objects cannot fall through it. So this is compile body. Since Jason asked about NGA for NG4, I'm going to show this one, Kinplume. So Kinplume shows how to use Angular 3 to apply some effects or post-processing to your scene. So this one is an object that I like, is like a model, an external model loaded in the scene, and apply some noise effect on this object. And we can just look at the code, and you can see right here. So this is the effect part. There's an effect composer. You can just look up in 3JS how to use effect composer. This is exactly the same, but simpler. And then we look at the keen component. So keen component, there we go. So JSON, not just directive like ngIf. I mean, Angular knowledge can just transfer over. Here I use, because this is an async operation, right? We load a model, we load like an access model resource. It is an observable, and we can just async this observable with ngIf, and then we give it like a template variable, and then we use that template variable on something else, right? Keen right there. That's the object that is loaded, asynced, like unwrapped with async and ngIf. So now we have this little guy right here. Of course, now ngIf, you can do a loading scene, a loading like text or something like that when you're waiting for this object to come back. So yes, you can use it. Everything just works, and you can just animate that as well. So next is another physics, and another fun example with physics. So now I have some sphere, I have this like cubes running around, constrained by the walls, and it just kick all of these spheres. And we can just look at the code. And again, a lot of the things happen inside of the template. This is the plan with the which are the walls and the floor, right? With just these inputs. The box, which is the spinning box running around, it is a physics box, and it's just an animate. The spheres all of these is just from 3JS, from documentation of 3JS, and I just transfer it over. And that's it, right? So that's the kinematic cube. Last one I want to show is instances. So instances is a way to increase performance of your 3D scene. If you look at the docs right here, it say, okay, this sample shows 125,000 spheres spinning at 60 FPS. This is possible due to this instance mesh. Right, so technically every mesh is a draw call. A draw call is a request to the GPU to draw that object. So if we construct 125,000 meshes using NG4, right? So that would be an insane amount of load to GPU. But then we can leverage instance mesh. So if all of these objects are similar, we can instance them. So we can just create, we create all of them, and then we send one request to draw them to the GPU. So just one request, one draw call to the GPU, and draw all the instances of the mesh. So now let's go back to the canvas again. Look at the code. So just all of these just colors and stuff like that we set up for the instance. So it's just instance mesh with sphere geometry, mesh Lambert material, and we have that scene with 125,000 spheres, and that is those sphere right there. We can just spin it around, and there we go. All right, feel free to look through the API portion. I plan to do more explanation and more detailed APIs of each of the object. So wait, no, not each of the object. You can look that up in 3JS documentation, but basically each of the entity group. So like light, controls, geometries. I want to list them all. And this is the canvas, and talks about like what the default the canvas has, stuff like that, and all the inputs that the canvas has. Right? Objects, what kind of objects, where they come from, what they do, what they represent, how it works, right? How it works, how to reference it using viewchild, blah blah blah, and how to put existing objects, which is this is what we do with Keen, with the Keen Plume. We load 3D models, just like that, right? And tons of other things like pipes. I have some pipes to help with building your object, building your scene. Yeah, and that is it. That is it. So I'm gonna share this Angular 3 right now. So that is the repo. You'll file issues, do whatever you want to. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. If there's no questions about five minutes, I'm gonna stop stream because I think it's been 1 hour and an hour and a half. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop the stream and I'm gonna file the issues offline because there's still thing missing. Because if you look into the packages, Soba right now, there's only controls, there's ships, right? So all those ships, and they're still lacking a lot of things. So the core is pretty much done in Canon, which is the physics is pretty much done, but then post-processing in Soba still needs some more work. All right, and then it's just a matter of keeping up with 3JS version. Oh, why are you still here? I just want to show the generators. So I say that I use generators to generate most of the classes. So if you look at the core, we look at the geometries, and this is all geometry from 3JS, right? From 3JS. So we look at the box geometry. It is generated. It is from 3. right? Box geometry from 3. So everything from 3 that can be generated are generated. So I generate all the geometry and generate the materials. So all of these materials, so mesh basic right there, we use mesh standard and generated. It is generated. A lot of these things are generated. Even points, I think, are generated as well. Oh no, not points. Lines are generated. Lights are also generated. Ambient light generated. Yeah, a lot of these things are generated, and it just use these generator, and we just look at one of them. So we look at geometries and have some files, right? Those files just follow the same pattern, and I have this generator in here. So for all of this, I generate. And that's pretty much it. So that's the current state of the library. And again, I'm looking for contribution, and I hope you guys enjoy the stream, and I hope you guys explore the library. Let me know any feedbacks. I'd love to hear any feedbacks. All right. Thank you all. And I'll see you guys in the next one.